Christmas is just around the corner, so treat yourself or someone else to the gift of a brand new pair of Raycons. Their new everyday earbuds are the biggest refresh in years, and you can get up to 30% off your purchase when you visit buyraycon.com/skillup. Click the link below or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, well, this year's Game Awards nominations have caused quite a stir, haven't they? That's right, it's time for our annual dose of celebrity appearances, vape commercials, game trailers, and I'm missing something. Oh, that's right, awards. Just be sure to keep those speeches nice and snappy though, okay? Just because your game won debut indie of the year doesn't mean you have the right to steal the spotlight from what really matters at the Game Awards. Amazon discount deals, and low interest rate Visa cards. I kid, sort of. Last year's show was a real low point, I think. The honest truth is that despite the many shortcomings of the Game Awards, it's still something that I care about because I love the idea of celebrating the best this industry has to offer. It's great to see developers be recognized for their incredible work, and so I've never subscribed to the idea that the Game Awards are meaningless or don't matter. I mean, they don't in a literal sense, but seeing a developer get up there and give their acceptance speech, it's just nice. Seeing them quickly waved off stage by a please wrap it up teleprompter message, less nice. And look, full disclosure, I'm actually part of the over 100 strong judging panel that votes on the nominees and winners, but to be honest, I just write Outer Wilds into every slot of every category every year, so you can't blame me that Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree got a Game of the Year nomination. And that's the rub this year. The process has for the most part been less acrimonious than in previous years, except when it comes to the nominees for the coveted Game of the Year award. Some of the nominees are sailing through with little objection, like Astrobot, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Metaphor Refantasio, all absolutely phenomenal games that no one could reasonably argue don't at least deserve a look in. Black Myth Wukong also made the list, and that felt like a bit of an underdog despite its absolutely absurd sales. The critical reception to that one was a little more muted than how fans reacted to it, so there was a question mark as to whether or not it would make the cut, but it did, and plenty of people are very happy about that. Roguelike Balatro is the only indie on there this year, and you can tell the people who haven't played Balatro because they're the ones on Twitter being like, what the fuck, how did this shitty card game get nominated over this other game that I like? Shut the fuck up, man, just shut up for real. Do you have any idea how good Balatro is? Do you have any idea how much collective human productivity has been lost to this video game? No, Balatro deserves its spot, and I pity the maidenless fools who think otherwise. Speaking of maidenless, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree got a Game of the Year nomination, leading many people to be like, And like, look, fair enough, this is, after all, a DLC, not a standalone game. You need to own Elden Ring in order to play it, and you also need to be pretty far into Elden Ring in order to access it. Elden Ring is, of course, one of the greatest games ever made, and the 2022 Game of the Year winner. Is it fair, then, that an expansion to that game be given a Game of the Year nomination, given that the base game has already won that prize? The flip side is that Shadow of the Erdtree is not just any other DLC. It's like 50 to 80 hours long, which is roughly twice the size of Sekiro, which won Game of the Year back in 2018. It's the second highest rated release of the year on OpenCritic, just a smidge behind Astrobot, and it's also just extraordinary. Like, pretend this was a standalone release. Would this deserve a Game of the Year nomination? Most likely, yes. Still, there's plenty of back and forth about it on social media, with awards organizer Jeff Keighley copping a lot of flack for it, but the truth is, it's actually not his fault. There's a panel of judges who collectively voted for it, and were the game not such an incredibly worthwhile offering, it wouldn't have got a nomination. I guess this is my way of saying I totally see both sides, but I think I'm more in line with the argument that Shadow of the Erdtree deserves its spot because it earned it on its own merits. And if another future DLC for a different game comes along and it's the same level of astonishing quality, then I would vote in exactly the same way this year, which is to say that I would put Outer Wilds in every box. You're welcome. Sticking with FromSoft related news a little longer, did you guys hear that Sony are trying to buy the company that owns FromSoft? This is really happening, by the way. It started as a rumor earlier this week before being confirmed by the parties involved. The company is called Kadokawa, and they don't just own FromSoft. They're a fairly large entertainment conglomerate that owns a bunch of other studios, including Spike Chunsoft, who just put out Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, and Acquire, who just put out Mario and Luigi Brothership. They also put out the original Tenchu back in the day. Kadokawa also publish manga and anime, and they own Nico Nico, which is like Japanese YouTube. So needless to say, they're kind of a big deal, and Sony are in the process of trying to wholly acquire them. We really don't know much else at this point other than the fact that Kadokawa have issued a statement confirming the fact that yes, they have received a letter of intent from Sony, so this is definitely on the cards. Far from a done deal though, as these sorts of transactions often face all sorts of roadblocks, some of them regulatory depending on the size of the transaction, or the sort of mood that politicians are in. Either way, it's not impossible to imagine a future where FromSoft games are PlayStation exclusives forever, and frankly, I don't love that idea. If it does go through, I hope that FromSoft remains multi-platform, because it'd be a real shame for the communities who play their games on Switch or Xbox to be denied access to future releases. Speaking of Xbox, remember at the start of the year when the thought of Xbox putting our games on anything other than an Xbox console or a PC had the Xbox community completely up in arms? And Phil Spencer came out sheepishly saying, yeah, we're going to experiment with putting some Xbox games on other platforms, maybe start with Hi-Fi Rush, see how that goes. Well, it's November, folks, and those baby steps have turned into full-blown strides, because this is an Xbox, and this is an Xbox. Even this is an Xbox. You are watching this on an Xbox. Am I an Xbox? Are you? I know a bunch of people would be insulted by the mere suggestion, but I had to ask. When so many things can be an Xbox, it's hard to know who or what to trust. If you haven't already seen this, it's Xbox's huge new marketing push that it's launched for the holiday period, where the message to the world is what we've been seeing Microsoft tiptoe towards all year. The idea that Xbox isn't just 1 or 2 or 3 console SKUs anymore, it's basically anything with a screen. A PC is an Xbox, clearly, but so are laptops and smartphones and MetaQuest headsets and TVs, all thanks to Game Pass and Xbox's cloud gaming offering. The ad stops short of throwing a PS5 and Nintendo Switch up there for obvious reasons, but I'd bet big money that there's an internal version of those commercials that features those two, just for the private viewing pleasure of the Xbox executive team, of course. And Xbox boss Phil Spencer was getting out there too, giving new interviews to coincide with the launch of this campaign and laying down the law for this new era of Xbox. Here's the juiciest quote. When it comes to Xbox's new mantra of multi-platform publishing, Spencer told Bloomberg that, quote, I do not see sort of red lines in our portfolio that say thou must not, end quote. He also caveated that with the opinion that it's too early to make a definitive call about the next Halo, but if you're saying no red lines, I'm going to guess that means no red lines. In a separate interview with Rolling Stone, Spencer seemed to acknowledge the criticisms that the company has faced in its pursuit to go wide, and said that while some people, quote, long for the simplicity of a single box, single platform, single game, today's largest games are bigger than any of the individual platforms, end quote. On the one hand, definitely spoken like the head of a company whose boxes come in last place in the big box race, but there is some truth to what he's saying. While there are definitely always going to be your Zeldas and your Sony first-party titles, there's no denying that the highest grossing games of the past 10 years are the ones that are multi-platform. Think Baldur's Gate 3 and Cyberpunk and Elden Ring and GTA 5 and plenty more. In a way, Xbox is taking a big risk and attempting to leapfrog Sony and Nintendo by really pushing how many platforms they can get their games out onto, leveraging Game Pass, leveraging cloud, and hoping that it pays off in a big way in terms of subscription revenue and mindshare. In fact, he actually does tell Rolling Stone that, quote, our biggest growth in Xbox players is on PC and cloud. The console space, all up, isn't growing across all of them. We love those customers, but in terms of continuing to expand and grow Xbox, it's about PC, it's about cloud, and it's about making our games more available in more places, end quote. Though we did say, quote, we'll definitely do more consoles in future and other devices, end quote. What are those other devices, you ask? Well, during this round of interviews, Phil continuously alludes to the fact that Xbox definitely wants to take a look at the handheld PC gaming market now that it's been well established and doesn't appear to be going away anytime soon. Xbox already had some Game Pass partnerships with devices like the ROG Ally, but it seems like they still want to get in on that themselves, but only after they get their mobile app situation all fixed up, apparently. Here's what Spencer told Bloomberg, quote, longer term, I love us building devices and I think our team can do some really innovative work, but we want to be informed by learning and what's happening now, end quote. Meanwhile, Rolling Stone quizzed him on the mid-cycle console update topic, given that the PS5 Pro has just launched. Naturally, you'd expect Spencer to be against investing too much into consoles, and he basically has put himself and the company into the diminishing returns camp. Here's what he said, quote, we don't need to do incremental hardware for our own benefit. Does a new device really give you a unique experience on a screen in some way? It's less like the old days, going from the original Xbox to 360, that was standard definition to high definition. Now it's harder to show the benefits, end quote. It seems like for Microsoft, portability and accessibility are higher priorities than raw horsepower, and given how successful both the Nintendo Switch and the Steam Deck have been, it seems like there is some wisdom in his approach. Moving on to other news now, and have you guys seen what's been going on with Half-Life 2? Well, recently, Valve rolled out a big update to the game to commemorate its 20th anniversary. That update delivered better controller support, primarily for Steam Deck, I'd wager. It also got integrated Steam Workshop support, plus 3.5 2.5 hours worth of director's commentary baked into the game. Valve also made Half-Life 2 free for the weekend, which resulted in the game breaking its historical concurrent player record, hitting 64,000 people. That's like 73 Never mind, that's just mean at this point. But perhaps the most noteworthy thing about this celebration is the release of a new no-clip/secret tape documentary about the making of Half-Life 2, where Valve finally provides some closure in regards to the fate of Half-Life 2 Episode 3, the no-show that was the butt of hundreds of jokes about Valve, and further proof of their deep-seated fear of the number 3. Anyway, the long and the short of it is that they were going just fine on Episode 1 and 2, which basically released within a year of each other, but then according to longtime Valve developer David Spear, a little game called Left 4 Dead needed all hands on deck to ship on time, and so it was tools down for the Half-Life team. Here's what David had to say.
It was a really tight shipping schedule, and it required a lot of work from everybody to get out the door, and it was worth it. I mean, it was.
Yeah, Left 4 Dead came out.
Left 4 Dead came out great, but it took long enough. And this is the tragic and almost comical thing about it, was it took long enough that then by the time we considered going back to Episode 3, the argument was made like, well, we missed it. It's too late now, and we really need to make a new engine and to continue the Half-Life series and all that. And now that just seems, in hindsight, so wrong.
Yeah.
We could have definitely gone back and spent 2 years to make Episode 3.
A bit later on, Valve CEO and co-founder Gabe Newell shows up and basically says a version of what we'd heard in the past. But Gabe didn't really see how an Episode 3 would push things forward, so it didn't really feel like it was worth it. Here's Gabe, quote, "You can't get lazy and say, oh, we're moving the story forward. That's copping out on your obligation to gamers. Yes, of course they love the story, they love many, many aspects of it, but sort of saying that your reason to do it is because people want to know what happens next, we could have shipped it. Like, it wouldn't have been that hard. My personal failure was being stumped. Like, I couldn't figure out why doing Episode 3 was pushing anything forward," end quote. Now, there was one cool thing that Half-Life Episode 3 could have done, and that's a new version of the game-changing gravity gun, which would have been the ice gun. Imagine like May from Overwatch, but like 10 years earlier, and you've kind of got the idea. The documentary shows some in-development footage of Gordon using the ice gun to create makeshift ice walls for cover, and surfing around on an ice path he shoots in front of him like Silver Surfer or Frozone in The Incredibles. Pretty damn cool. The game would have been set in the Arctic, by the way, hence all the ice stuff. Anyway, Valve tries to console us all by saying that had they ended up making Episode 3, stuff like Portal 2 and Left 4 Dead 2 probably wouldn't have happened, and those are definitely some very innovative all-timers. Well worth watching the full 2-hour documentary, which is fascinating and very well put together, and of course, playing Half-Life 2 if you've never tried it. It holds up extraordinarily well, and perhaps even more so today after these updates. A quick lightning round to finish off. Remember a couple of weeks ago where we talked about the fact that 3 new studios had popped up in the wake of Disco Elysium's 5th anniversary, all laying claim to the legacy and spiritual succession to the game? Well, now we know that their announcements definitely weren't a coordinated thing because they are fighting. Summer Eternal is the art collective co-founded by Argo Tulik, who was a writer for the original Disco Elysium and gave us the wonderful character Kuno. He's getting sued by the studio named Longdew, which announced that it was making a spiritual successor to Disco Elysium based on the world of the cancelled sequel. Longdew have been granted an injunction on Tulik, which stops him from doing any work with Summer Eternal until April 2025. Perhaps worth noting that Longdew is backed by private equity from the tech sector, and even though it says former Disco Elysium developers are involved, they haven't really said who, though they've told PC Gamer that Tulik was actually there in the early days of Longdew, but it just didn't work out. Just like the last huge conflict around Disco Elysium, it feels like another battle of ideals between artists and money people, but there's undoubtedly a lot more politics happening behind the scenes here, so we'll just leave it there for now. Assassin's Creed Shadow is apparently getting a single-player battle pass of some kind. Details of this were leaked and collated in a Reddit thread which described a 20-tier battle pass filled with cosmetic items and in-game currency, all housed within an in-game hub called Animus Hub. Ubisoft DMCA'd that stuff real quick, but they did get out there and say that yes, the Animus Hub exists, and it's basically what they were calling Assassin's Creed Infinity a while back, which is probably going to link all of the AC games with a narrative anchor to the modern day story. They also clarified that the rewards available would be entirely free, and that there would be no paid subscriptions or paid battle pass, and there will be regular free content and missions. Honestly, it just sounds like they're moving all of the Ubisoft Connect meta progression stuff to a different place when Assassin's Creed Shadow lands, but we'll likely get more details later down the line. Ubisoft has ditched their monetized season pass and early pass plans in the wake of Star Wars Outlaws not doing so hot. But there's always a chance they could change their minds when they get comfy again, so watch this space. Hopefully they change their minds about this one. The live-action film adaptation of Splinter Cell that was first announced in 2012 was apparently canned long ago. This one was set to star Tom Hardy as Sam Fisher and had the director of Edge of Tomorrow at the helm, but producer Basil Ivanek, who was taking interviews as part of the 10th anniversary of John Wick, confirmed that the project was now dead, saying, quote, "That movie would have been awesome, just couldn't get it right script-wise, budget-wise, but it was going to be great. We had a million different versions of it, but it was going to be hardcore and awesome. That's one of the ones that got away, which is really sad," end quote. One thing that's not getting away though are good old games. GOG has announced that it's setting up a dedicated preservation program to look after a selection of classic PC games to ensure that they continue to be playable on modern computers. It seems kind of like what they're already doing, only a bolder commitment to make sure a certain collection of them are constantly looked after. They'll continue to update them to make sure they work and look fine, restore localizations, iron out weird things like, you know, the game asking to insert a CD or whatever, and provide tech support to anyone who buys them. They've identified 100 games to start with as part of this preservation program, including titles like Diablo 1, the original Resident Evil games, and Heroes of Might and Magic 3. Love to see it. They're all DRM free, of course. God bless GOG, putting their money where their mouth is and fighting a very good fight at a time when physical media is on the way out and publishers are doing their darndest to make sure that digital licenses can be yanked away at a moment's notice. So what got announced this week? Well, in the lead up to the Game Awards, the announcement well is running a little dry, but we did get the announcement of a new Monster Hunter game for mobile. That's right, Monster Hunter Outlanders comes from Timmy Studio, the Tencent-owned developer responsible for Call of Duty Mobile and Pokemon Unite, and now Capcom has given them the reins to the Monster Hunter franchise with the task of translating the mainline survival and hunting experience to mobile. They say it'll be fully featured, and from the initial trailer it does look quite impressive, and yet another moment of, wow, mobile games can do this? No specific details for this one yet aside from its ambitiously broad pitch, but there are supposedly several playtests planned before it launches globally, and chances are very good that it'll be a free-to-play game, so, you know, set your expectations accordingly when it comes to game structure and monetization. Hey, speaking of mobile, Final Fantasy XIV producer Yoshi P confirmed something that has been long rumored. Final Fantasy XIV is getting a mobile port, and it looks to be like an honest-to-goodness port, not some kind of gacha spin-off like we were all worried it would be. There's no specifics on this one yet, other than a lengthy gameplay trailer which shows a very promising, near one-to-one looking port, though I do wonder how you'd squeeze the sheer number of action buttons into a mobile format. Hey, this is kind of interesting. Blizzard announced and released remastered editions of Warcraft 1 and 2, the original strategy games that started that whole universe of theirs. Launched as part of Warcraft's 20th anniversary celebrations, they feature some modern control improvements and also an upscaled look to its original sprites, which I'm not convinced on. It kind of looks a bit like AI upscaling that kind of robs the original sprites of their charm. Almost looks like a mobile game at times. Need to see it in the flesh, of course, but the trailer certainly didn't sell me on the visual overhaul. Elsewhere in the world of Warcraft celebrations, Blizzard announced a 2.0 update for Warcraft 3 Reforged, aka Warcraft 3 Refunded, one of the worst remasters in the history of remasters, and we've had some doozies. Update 2.0 features a raft of graphical improvements and quality of life updates, which the community seemed to be broadly happy with, but the game is still a far cry from being the sort of remaster that might actually supplant the original. In addition to all of this, Blizzard also announced new bits and pieces for World of Warcraft, including the future inclusion of cars and player houses, Miss of Pandaria Classic, and the reveal of a World of Warcraft Classic, which is called WoW Classic 20th Anniversary Edition and restarts the cycle all over again. Man, we're just going to keep reliving Cataclysm every 5 years for the rest of our lives, aren't we? A few release date announcements now, and constant time traveling is the big theme in Old Skies, the latest point-and-click adventure game from Wadjet Eye Studios, a developer and publisher that's been on the vanguard of keeping the genre alive through thick and thin. Old Skies is a sci-fi story that involves time traveling through 7 eras of New York, from the Gilded Age of the 1880s to September 11. The demo out right now is intriguing. It's got a release date window of Q2 next year. That is also when Atomfall releases, though it's got a more specific release date of 27th of March. This is the new one from Sniper Elite developer Rebellion, and it's an action survival game that's theme is basically like what if Fallout, but in England in the 1960s. A bit of a change of pace for this studio, but they've had some consistently solid output over the last few years, so definitely worth keeping an eye on this one. Also worth keeping an eye on these beautiful dresses featured in Infinity Nikki. Okay, so bear with me. Nikki is a long-running series about playing dress-up, having your cool clothes be the source of abilities. And Infinity Nikki is the latest game that turns it into a full-blown, like, Breath of the Wild-style mobile gacha game in the same vein as Genshin Impact, and it's got a release date of December 5th, 2024. Now that Breath of the Wild comparison isn't just aesthetic here, because one of the game's sub-directors is a person by the name of Kentaro Tominaga, whose recent list of credits includes being a designer on Breath of the Wild, and before that being a sub-director on Twilight Princess, A Link Between Worlds, and Wind Waker, among other Nintendo titles. Apparently, over 32.5 million people have already hit the pre-register button on their respective app stores for this one, so yeah, obviously plenty of people very keen to play dress up, and you know what, it looks pretty good. And finally, sticking with December mobile releases for a little longer, Capcom is dropping Resident Evil 2 Remake on iOS and Mac on December 10th, which basically continues their trend of porting every modern RE game to Apple's ecosystems, with just Resident Evil 3 Remake left. There have been some reports this year that those ports are not selling very many copies at all, but I suspect this is part of a longer term play as phones get more and more capable of playing games like this. While the developers and publishers will be struggling to play catch up, Capcom will just have their entire back catalog ready to go whenever new iPhone or Mac owners wonder what games they can play. So what came out last week? Well, it's been a big month for video game releases and a big year for video game releases, and thankfully it's all almost over so we can spend some time actually playing everything we didn't have time for. Farming Simulator 25 may be one of those games depending on, you know, what your kink is. It just released to a fairly decent OpenCritic score of 76, though for these sorts of games I find the Steam reviews are generally more useful, and over there it's sitting at a mostly positive 73%. The sentiment from those who have played it is basically, yeah, there are some upgrades here, but generally speaking you'd be better off playing the older versions for the moment. Steam user BonkStick has over 35 hours in the game already and said, quote, "Very neutral review. I had high expectations of what we could expect to see in 25. So far it's met 80% of that. The game is visually appealing, has awesome new vehicle manufacturers, maps are beautifully done, graphics are mind-blowing on Ultra, some integrated features that were mods in the previous games are now base game, which is cool, easy to use and very helpful, but some aspects just feel like it's 22 through rose-tinted glasses," end quote. Next up is Beastie Ball, which is a new creature collecting game that involves you collecting a team of creatures to play in a volleyball tournament. It comes from Wishes Unlimited, the developer of wholesome games like Chicory, A Colorful Tales, and Wondersong, and it's gotten a pretty good reception for its early access launch. No scores for this one just yet, but GameSpot had a lot to say about its charming take on actually caring for these creatures. Quote, "This is not a tale of conquest, it is a story about community. This has long been a genre where we often, consciously or not, ignore the uncomfortable implications of a story's universe. But Beastie Ball proves you can have it both ways. In the broad sense, the one that will ultimately determine the game's staying power, it's an awesome creature collector that will surely scratch the Pokemon itch so many never quite satisfy, but by bringing the studio's now trademark air of emotional sincerity and attentive kindness to a genre where it's often lacking, Beastie Ball is the creature collector I always wanted, but I wasn't sure I'd ever get," end quote. By the way, 98% of the Steam reviews for this one are positive, so if Pokemon with guns made you uncomfortable, then maybe think about Pokemon with volleyball. Let's hope Nintendo doesn't go after these guys either. From one creature collector to another, Temtem Swarm is the Vampire Survivors-like spin-off for this particular creature collecting series, and it's been released in early access to a pretty positive reception on Steam. 86% of the reviews for this one are positive, with lots of shoutouts to the co-op mode. Steam user Kamazu has 31 hours on it so far and says, quote, "Great relaxing game that has a decent amount of meta, which is just complex enough to be fun and keep you playing. At launch there's a fairly decent amount of content, and I can see there is a decent roadmap for new levels, Temtem, and abilities. Overall, a good buy in an age of copy-paste games," end quote. Songs of Silence is that beautiful looking strategy game that mixes 4X, auto battler, and deck building. This week it released into 1.0 on PC and consoles after an early access period. Recent Steam reviews put it at a 72% positive and praise the polish and craft of its presentation, but some reviews take issue with the overall game balancing. Luckily, that's usually the kind of thing developers can fix up post-launch. Meanwhile, a game that is on the opposite side of the scale when it comes to presentation, 420 Blaze It 2 is the visual mess of a meme FPS that is actually getting a pretty good rap on Steam, with 98% of the reviews so far being positive. Steam user Matzel has 10 hours clocked with this and said, quote, "Not gonna lie, I expected a really terribly executed meme shooter, but this shit was awesome. Really good boomer shooter with very good controls and very fun ideas that kept me going. Really catch the 2012 to 2014 meme vibes," end quote. See, we told you it was a real game. A quick shout out to Little Big Adventure Twinson's Quest, which is the full remake of an early 90s character action game on PC. That one's gotten a very positive reception on Steam as well, with 90% of the reviews there being positive and plenty of chatter about the nostalgia for that era of PC gaming. Okay, moving on to the big guns right now, Dragon Quest III HD 2D. This one's sitting at a mighty 85 on OpenCritic, with the core game seeming to hold up nicely with the upgrade. Remember, this is arguably Japan's favorite Dragon Quest game, neck and neck with 5. PC Gamer scored this one a massive give 91 out of 100, saying, quote, "Every twist offers some extraordinary mini story arc, from false kings to daring rescues, and the overworld, normally the bit between the interesting stuff, is packed with hidden treasures and fun secrets. It's a perfect remake. The changes are substantial yet respectful, supremely nostalgic and surprising all at once. This is more than RPG history made accessible to modern audiences. This is a great RPG for anyone who longs to go on a fantastic Dragon Quest," end quote. Eurogamer had a bit of a different take, however, landing on 3 stars out of 5 and ultimately saying that dated ideas like random encounters still hold it back. Quote, "For every change that enhances the original, there are points where it hasn't evolved enough and ends up holding itself back in the process. There's still a good game to be discovered here, and if you've played the original, you'll undoubtedly enjoy this remake. If you're a more casual Dragon Quest or JRPG liker looking to check out a classic though, you may find yourself bouncing off it when battles start feeling like a bit of a slog," end quote. Speaking of slogs, that seems to be the takeaway on LEGO Horizon Adventures, unfortunately, which sits at a fair 72 on OpenCritic at the moment. There are a lot of harsh reviews out there, like Eurogamer's 2 out of 5 stars. Here's what they had to say, quote, "Every time I can only bash in one of 3 available destructible items in any given area, I'm reminded that yes, I'm actually in the LEGO movie, and I'm stuck inside Will Ferrell's lifeless LEGO diorama den again. It's a decidedly joyless kind of game, the sort that's better to look at than actually play with, and one that does little to bridge the gap between its 2 main subjects. I still don't know why it exists or who it's for, and there's little evidence to suggest that Gorilla or Gobu know the answer either," end quote. GameSpot was one of the more moderate takes with a 7 out of 10, emphasizing the fact that, yeah, this game is probably meant to be played primarily by small children with a parent alongside them. Quote, "Like a lot of content aimed at families, my strongest sense of joy is found not in how I experience LEGO Horizon, but in watching my kids become immersed in it. Levels often feel repetitive, but combat is exciting and tactical enough to teach depth and ask players to consider their approach, even as Aloy may be dressed as a corn cob, a firefighter, or a pug. It's that blend of childlike style and mechanical substance that makes LEGO Horizon Adventures a lovely game to play for parent and child pairings, though it's also just neat to see these usually self-serious characters put through a washing machine loaded with crayons," end quote. Alright, so what's coming out this week? Well, biggest release of the week is Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl, which is out right now for PC and Xbox. My review for this went up overnight, and sadly, I could not recommend it right now. I spent 25 hours with it, and I found it to be such a mess of bugs and poor performance and unfinished game systems that it totally sapped the enjoyment out of what I could tell will one day be a really great experience. Like, I could absolutely feel the potential of this game sagging under the weight of its undercooked technical state, and it made me sad because I know what GSC had to go through to get this game out the door, and it would have been great had this one been a home run right out of the gate. Having said all of this, I was reviewing it before a 140GB day 1 patch arrived, which by many accounts has fixed a number of the critical bugs that I was encountering. I can't verify that myself as I haven't been able to put time into the game post-launch, but the general consensus from people playing it on PC is that the game still has its problems, absolutely, but it's not as bad as what I experienced during my review window, and that's really encouraging. On Steam, the game currently sits at a very positive 81%, with most of the negative reviews pointing to residual technical issues that weren't fixed by that day 1 patch. Over on OpenCritic, the score is a little lower since reviewers played the same build I did. There it sits at a strong 77, which is still a solid score, but it doesn't speak to the potential of this game. Like, if this were working as intended, this feels like a 9 out of 10 experience, for real. So I really do look forward to returning to this game in the future when it's fully fixed and finished. I think it'll be a real banger then, but for now, I'd hold off. Here's a fun little one to contrast the dour mood of Stalker. Locomotive is a charming looking point-and-click adventure murder mystery being published by Wargroove and Eastwood publisher Chucklefish, coming to PC and Switch on November 21st. It's also a slapstick comedy capturing the spirit of that LucasArts tone, and it looks like a very promising one if you like your classic adventure games. If you're more a fan of yelling bullshit at an inanimate object, however, here's one for you. Dungeon Crawler is coming to PC Early Access on November 21st, and it's a roguelike dungeon crawler where the primary mechanic is using a claw machine. So if the randomness of roguelikes wasn't enough for your sadistic self, then boy, are you in for a treat. This one looks kind of interesting. It's called Strenova, and it comes out on November 21st as well. It's a tactical third-person multiplayer shooter whose big selling point is sexy anime characters who have the ability to turn themselves from 3D into paper-thin 2D characters, with a level design being built around that. Really feels like a throw darts at a dartboard kind of concept, but it could work. We'll check back next week. Jumping ahead to next week, New Arc Lion is another RPG trying its hand at the early access model on Tuesday, November 26th, with the first quarter of the game and a couple of races available. It's a modern top-down CRPG set in a world that mixes steampunk and magic, and I'm really into the visual style for this one. Definitely keen to see how this one goes. Joining New Arcaline on Tuesday is the console release of Nine Souls, a really great 2D combat game from earlier this year, made by the folks who made horror titles like Devotion and Detention. It takes great inspiration from Sekiro, and it's well worth checking out on all platforms if that's your kind of game. And finally, the last game we'll mention this week is Neon Blood, a very striking looking cyberpunk adventure game coming to all platforms. It's trying its hand at the whole 2D, 3D art style thing and mixing in some turn-based combat with detective style adventuring, looking very stylish, and yes, it sure does have a lot of neon. A lot of smaller games mentioned on the show this week, as the year's biggest releases are mostly out at this point, so we thought we'd feature something even smaller for this segment, so put this on your radar. You don't get much smaller than a game called Miniatures, and disclaimer, this one is very short, with the developer being upfront about the fact that the whole experience lasts for around 45 minutes with a small price point to suit. But as you can see from the trailer, the big selling point here is the beautiful hand-drawn art and the animation, as well as the surreal and unsettling vibes. Miniatures is a point-and-click game that explores 4 separate vignettes that seem nice and charming at first, but features some really eerie undertones, and it comes from a very small team whose last game was nominated for a BAFTA. So if you're up for something a little bit different as a palate cleanser before diving into your next big one, take a look at Miniatures. You can follow the link down to our Steam Curator page where you can find all of the other games we've featured in this segment in the past. Sort of free stuff time now, and on Epic you can still pick up the Castlevania Anniversary Collection, which collects a bunch of early games from the series, as well as Snakebird Complete, which we didn't mention last week, but it's a nice little action puzzle game for the times in your life when you just need one of those. On Friday, November 22nd, they'll be replaced by Beholder, which is a unique stealth game from 2016 where you play as a government agent who works for a totalitarian state, with your job being to spy on citizens and sniff out traitors. Really interesting title, and there are actually 2 sequels to it if this one really ends up tickling your fancy. Over on Xbox Game Pass, Microsoft announced that the Spyro Reignited trilogy would be coming to Game Pass this week, and it should be available on the service right now. Maybe if enough of us play it, they'll revive their cancelled Spyro game, who knows. Over on PS Plus, Sony announced the new slate of titles coming to the game catalog for extra and premium subscribers, with the headline being the return of Grand Theft Auto 5 if for some reason you're one of the 200 million people in the world who don't already own it. Dying Light 2 is also on there if you need another post-apocalyptic zombie fix, as well as Like a Dragon Ishin. That's the Yakuza game set in historic Japan, and I really love that one. I really recommend checking that out. It absolutely ruled. For premium members, the classics this month include the first 2 Resistance games. Man, remember that series? Fighting an alien invasion post-World War II. Put Insomniac back on that one, I say. The first 2 Legacy of Kain games are also on there for those looking to prepare themselves for the Soul Reaver remasters coming in December, and the PSVR 2 title for the month is Synapse, which by all accounts is an excellent action game with some telekinesis thrown in there for good measure, plus it features the voice of Metal Gear Solid Snake guy, you know, David Hayter, love him. Over on Prime Gaming, they're closing out their offering for November with a couple of games from Frontier, the spaceflight sim Elite Dangerous, and the first Jurassic World Evolution, a park management game. Both pretty good, and they're complemented by Overcooked 1 and Super Meat Boy, which were thrown up this week. For our feel-good story for the week, we're going to do something a little different. Usually we like to point out something silly, something that'll get a chuckle out of you, hopefully, but sometimes I just like to show you things that I think are nice. And Sam Lake is nice. He is the boss of Remedy, and during an investor update, he talked about the industry, the process of making games, and what makes Remedy. Here's the best part.
Games require long, complex productions. Games are cutting-edge technological achievements. Games are hit business. We strive to create commercial hits. All of this is true. All of this is needed. All of this must be in balance for us to succeed. What else is true? Games are ambitious, passionate works of creative expression. Games are high-quality entertainment. What we create at Remedy is special, and we must never lose that.
I don't know about you guys, but as someone who has to listen to executives speak week in, week out, spouting the most boring, inane corporate drivel you can imagine with seemingly no real passion for the industry or art form beyond how much money it could make them, it's just really nice to hear from a video game boss who actually gives a shit. It's just, yeah, it's nice. God bless Sam Lake, God bless Remedy, Very glad to see them keep on keeping on. All right, ladies and gents, that is the show for the week. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and if you did, please do consider dropping the video a like, because that's a huge help to us over here in YouTube land. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, then hey, that button's right there, so smack that bad boy. And while you're at it, you may as well ding that notification bell so you'll know the minute a video goes live. Got an Avowed preview coming up sometime next week, so do stay tuned for that one. And Austin also spent time with the first Descendant. Spoiler alert, he did not like it. Look forward to those out soon, but for now, thanks for watching, and a big thanks to this video sponsor, Raycon. It's nearly that time of the year, Christmas, when many of us are scrambling around trying to find the perfect gift without breaking the bank. Luckily, this video sponsor, Raycon, is here to save the day. See, Raycons are a fantastic gift because not only are they a really high quality set of earbuds packed with features, but they're also really competitively priced. I mean, maybe your mum or your dad is constantly watching videos on their phone, volume maxed. Wouldn't it be nice if you could give them a pair of earbuds, they could just pop those in at any time, a better audio experience for them, and some peace and quiet for you. Win-win. You've probably seen Raycons before, but what you probably don't know is that they just refreshed their everyday earbuds. This new model is an evolution of Raycon's already incredibly solid and reliable product, improving every aspect of it while also adding entirely new features. On the improved side of things is the design, which is even more comfortable and ergonomic than before, and their in-ear design means that they stay on your ears way better than many other earbuds. There's also improved battery life. These things will go up to 32 hours now, 8 hours of direct playtime, and a fast charging case that gives you 90 minutes of playback in just 10 minutes of charging. In terms of newly added features, the everyday earbuds now have active noise cancelling, and this is a feature that you usually have to pay a premium for from other brands, but Raycon have just added it while maintaining their same affordable price point that they've always been famous for. There's also now support for multi-point connectivity, meaning you can sync 2 devices at once, and the earbuds will automatically switch to whichever device is outputting audio. It is super convenient being able to sync these things to an iPhone and an iPad at the same time. They even went the extra mile with the case, since in addition to your choice of colors for the earbuds, you can also buy a case protector that comes in a range of additional colors. I got the yellow sunset option, making it a lot easier to spot when I leave these things laying around my house, which is what I usually do. These everyday earbuds are brand new. They just arrived and they deliver so much value for money given how much functionality is baked into them given the price. I've used them for literally years now and have always been impressed with their performance and reliability. Hell, I actually own a few pairs of these because I like to keep one by my bedside that I just use at nighttime or whatever, and I keep one in my gym bag so that I don't accidentally forget to put them in my gym bag and then I have to go to the gym without earbuds, which really annoys me. The quality and affordability of Raycons make them the perfect Christmas gift. So if you want to grab a pair, then you're in luck because Raycon are doing a special deal for viewers of this channel. Visit buyraycon.com/skillup to get up to 30% off your order. That link is below and it's pinned in the top comment, but it's buyraycon.com/skillup for 30% off your order. Thanks Raycon for sponsoring the video and thank you for watching it.